In case you don't know, here's a picture of my family, in case you don't know. There we are, everybody. And this in the middle is Patty's dad. His name is Jack. He's actually been here once from Michigan. And then for those of you that don't know, our daughter Janessa, our son Jake, and our daughter Carmen, or daughter-in-law, just so they understand that a brother and sister didn't get married, okay? Our religion, we don't believe in that, just so you know, okay? And then, of course, little Kenny, who had a 3-year-old birthday this week. Come on now. And so that's my family, just for those that don't know. And one of the greatest joys in my life is right there. That's what puts a smile on my face more than anything else. It's who I'd rather hang out with more than anybody else. And I think one of the things that keeps me from taking my family for granted is I grew up without one. And as a little kid, I remember praying every night until I was somewhere around 13 years old. I prayed from the age of 5 to 13, virtually every night. God, I want a dad. I want a dad in my life. And then when I got a little older, I realized, well, I don't know, but God, I just want a family. What I didn't realize is God would bring me a family, but it would be my family, and it wouldn't be when I was a kid. It would be when I was an adult. Well, I should say, while I was in an adult body, I was still a kid. How many can relate to that, right? And so I grew up without one, and I wanted one so bad. And I'll just say from me, our kids, and I'm speaking for Patty here today too, but our kids, they are our greatest joy. But how many parents can relate, your kids are also your greatest stress? Not because they're bad. I'm not talking about them being bad, because none of your kids are bad. They move around this church like angels. They never do anything wrong. Look at all the parents are like, all right, is he talking about your kids? I'm not sure, all right? But it's the most stressful and exhausting thing that I have ever done is raising kids. Can I get a amen from the ones that have done it or the ones that are trying to do it, right? I mean, this couple right here, they're only 22 years old. No, I'm just kidding, all right? Adults, what happens is we get older and we don't understand kids anymore. What happens is we kind of forget what it was to be a kid, right? And kids don't really even understand their parents. So there's this communication gap. We don't understand kids, and kids don't understand us. And then they become teenagers, and then they're really aliens. How many know? I think it was Mark Twain that said, raise your kids, and everything's fine until they're 5 years old, and then put them in a barrel. And then put the lid on the barrel and feed them through the knot hole of the barrel. When they become teenagers, plug up the knot hole, all right? I'm not preaching that today. I'm just saying what Mark Twain said. We don't really, even as kids, we don't understand our parents. I didn't understand my mom. I grew up with a single mom, and I didn't understand my mom. I didn't understand how come when she was tired, I had to take a nap, right? Or when she was cold, I had to put a coat on. How many know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Yesterday we were all sitting outside and there was a bee on the deck, and Carmen said to little Kenny, he said she was afraid of the bee, and she said, if you don't bother it, it won't bother you. And it made me angry because I remember the time we were driving down the road in our 1967 Ford station wagon, and remember those little wing windows, you guys? And a bumblebee hit that wing window and came into the car and was mad and was flying all over. I was like an 8-year-old kid. I started crying. Mom, there's a bee in the car. And she said, it must come out of mother's textbooks. She said, if you don't bother it, it won't bother you. I started crying harder. She said, what's the matter with you? I said, Mom, I don't know what bothers the bee. It's already pretty mad. You hit it with the car, right? And how many of you had moms that had it and they always had it up to, show me the mark? I've had it right up to here. I was never brave enough to say, well, Mom, you got about an inch to go, you know? Moms, I just wonder, how come you can't come in like before it's at Mach 9? How come you can't come in and say, I've had it about up to here. We'll give you guys a little bit of grace. I don't understand that, right? And, of course, I recently told you when I bought the little lawnmower to start my own little lawnmower business. And my mom said, if you cut your legs off with that lawnmower, don't come running to me, you know. And I just don't understand. Mom, I don't understand. Sometimes our frustrations makes us feel like the lady who borrowed a playpen from one of her friends. Do we still have playpens? Is that still a thing? This mama said, we got twins. Thank God for playpens, all right? And she borrowed a playpen from one of her friends, and a few days later, she sent a thank you note and said, it was exactly what I needed. Every day, I jump in it while the kids run wild. Family life looks crazy these days. Sometimes we feel guilty for being frustrated. And we feel guilty that, man, our kids aren't well behaved. Or we feel guilty that I should have done a better job. Or we feel guilty because somehow the Leave It to Beaver rerun came on and your family doesn't look like that. And so we feel guilty. Today is not about any condemnation because the good news is God knows your kid's name. And He has a plan and purpose for them. The challenge is that God puts them in our family, in our home, to steward those and bring those gifts out, right, everyone? And I got to thinking, why is raising kids so hard? Now, there's a whole lot of reasons, but let me give you two, still in the way of introduction, and then I want to take you to a Bible verse that I think will help us. But why is raising kids hard? Number one is we don't always know what to say or do. Is that right, parents? We just don't always have the answer. We don't know, sometimes we honestly don't know if we should be laughing or crying. How many know what I'm talking about, right? It's like, it's really funny, it's really naughty, but it's really funny, right? And you're trying to discipline, look at some of you are like, yeah. And we don't have, I know all the spiritual people in the room say, we have the Bible. I know, but for the rest of us, we don't have this reference book that tells us about every situation and every circumstance and every friend. You know, at least driving a car, you have an indicator light, right? You have an indicator light that says you need to change the oil, you're getting low on fuel. Wouldn't it be great if our kids just had like an indicator light right on their forehead that shined up, and told us what they needed? I wish that they did. And often that works for, what happens is often what works for one family doesn't necessarily work for another family. And I want you to hear that statement because my whole premise is built off of that. Because you can't come in and just hear one message and say, okay, I have 3 keys, my kids are going to be godly. No, because every child is different. Am I right about this? Yeah? And so often what works for one family isn't the exact equation that works for another. Just as what works for one kid, doesn't always work for the other kid. From the same family. They got the same blood in them. And they're like, what? They're brothers and sisters? How in the world could that be? Now, I only have 2 examples to use, and I apologize to my kids before today got here. And all I have is Jake and Janessa. And so they're different as can be. Sending Jake to his room if he got in trouble was like a vacation to him. It was like a retreat. In fact, we still look for Jake often, and he's in a room somewhere all by himself to this day. And it was like a retreat for him to do that. But if I did that with Janessa, it would crush her. Jake loved to ask the question, why? How many of you have kids that ask why? Did you go through that phase? And by Patty's prompting, she said, honey, just answer the question why. It's how they learn. She's always so stinking positive, and it's how they learn. Just answer the questions. And so one day I decided I'm going to answer why every time to the best of my ability. And I think we got to 12 whys, and I finally said, because that's the way God meant it to be. It's just all I had left. You know what I'm talking about, right? And what's wonderful about that is now Jake has the daughter that's asking him why all the time. Aren't paybacks wonderful, grandparents? And they ask crazy questions. Janessa one time asked, does God have toenails? And she was serious. How do you answer those questions? And when we don't know what to say, how many of you know, parents, what do we often say when we don't know what to say? We say, no. No. In fact, we're really brilliant. We even spell it sometimes. N-O. In fact, sometimes we'll even say, what part of no don't you understand? Look at these parents. They're reading the same script, right? What part of no? But here's what I've come to learn as a parent and now as a grandparent, that the word no often means I love you. It often means I want to protect you. It's tricky giving your kids wings and roots all at the same time. It's a tricky thing. Why is raising kids hard? Number two, it's an exhausting, endless responsibility. All these parents that are, well, when they get out of the terrible twos, what happens then? Your parenting ends when they turn 2? Well, when they get out of that junior high, then, when they turn 18, then, when they get out of the house, then. No, once you're a parent, come on, you're always a parent, right? Now, I've always been a very responsible person. As a matter of fact, once in counseling, my counselor said, Ken, you're trying to be responsible for things that you don't need to be responsible for, and it's stressing you out. But when my kids were born, this sense of responsibility hit me like a ton of bricks. How many of you remember that, right? And I remember it clear. 2 of us went into the hospital, Patty and I. We went into the hospital, just me and her. We've been having a couple years, just me and her, having a wonderful time. But before we left the hospital, we had to take this little alien boy with us. 2 went in, 3 came out, and I don't know how the rest of you are, but I freaked out. When I was pushing her down the hospital hallway in the wheelchair and she's holding little Jake, I was freaking out. I thought, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. And of course, it was just this crazy situation. Matter of fact, they asked me to cut the umbilical cord. And I thought, what? All these doctors in here, we don't have enough people that can do that? I wasn't about to do that. I got Jake home. Parents nod at me if you did this. And I gave him the speech. You know what the speech is? I brought him home, our firstborn. We had his room all set up. I held him real close to me. And I gave the most it should have been scripted. It should be in books now. I said, son, I didn't grow up with a dad, but I'm going to be the best dad. I'm going to be there for you. I had tears coming down. It was a moment, man. I was holding him. He was looking at me. I'm going to be there for you all the time. And when I got done, tears running down my face, he projectile puked all over. And I almost think I heard God laugh when that happened. Because it was kind of like, see, that's what happens to me as a father, right, everybody, right? I heard it said that it costs, in today's market, about $300,000 to raise a boy, okay? And then I read on, and it costs about $30 million to raise a girl. Anybody have girls here? And you're like, yeah, I get it, all right? I've been in ministry since I was 19 years old, and I'm greatly aware of my responsibilities as a pastor. I'm greatly aware of my responsibilities and do's and don'ts to you as a church. But one of the things I think I did okay was I always put my responsibilities as a dad above that. And today I'm grateful because my family's sitting in here doing ministry with us. So let me take you through, amen. Let me take you through a verse that many of you parents have read. This is just kind of a refresher course. Proverbs chapter number 22, verse number 6. I'm going to read it out of the New American Standard Bible. And it says this. It says, train up a child in the way he should go. And even when he grows older, he will not abandon it. Now, let me just, I'm just using this as a backdrop. This is not a Bible study kind of a message today. But a lot of times, Christians will read that verse, and they'll misinterpret it, saying, we got to raise them in a godly way. Well, yes, we should raise them godly, but that's not what this verse is referring to. When it says train up a child in the way that he should go, it's not saying train up a child in the ways of church or in the ways of God. Yes, we should do that, and there are other verses regarding that, but that's not what this verse means at all. It says train up a child in the way he should go. There's a word here in the original text, it means in their bent. How many know every child has a bent? They have a personality, right? And so that's what that verse is talking about. It's talking about raising your child in accordance with the bent that they have, the personality that God put in them. So train up a child in the way he should go, because God designed us all a specific way. So as parents, we figure that out, and we raise them according to those bents. We raise them according to their strong will. We raise them according to their passive wills. Come on. We raise them with their high energy. We raise them with their low energy. We raise them with their parents' qualities. Right, everybody? We raise them that way. So, and then he says, even when he grows old or older, he will not abandon it. Okay, let me pull out a couple of things about this verse that I hope will help you. Number one, this verse tells me the first thing I need to do is you need to know your child. Parents, this takes engagement. You got to know your child. And you can't group all your children into one pile because they are very different. So you got to know them. When we were raising kids, Jake was cool, calm, and collected all the time. He was cool as a cucumber. Janessa, on the other hand, was perpetual motion, and she still is, all right? Okay? Now, let me give you an example. Patty homeschooled our kids up till, 4th grade or so. And so she homeschooled our kids. Jake would sit in his desk, at his chair, book open, pencil in hand, writing notes, studious it could be, just like his father. I'm a pastor, but I have feelings, you guys. He would sit there as studious as can be. Now, Janessa, on the other hand, she would sit in her chair upside down. She would throw things at the ceiling. And in other words, they were completely different. They were both learning. Patty, frustrated one day, said, okay, what did I just read? And Janessa quoted the whole chapter that she had just read in detail while sitting upside down. Maybe she needed more brain to her head. I'm not sure. But we can't raise them. We have to raise them the way they should go, and we can't raise them the way they should go, watch this, until we know who they are. Parents, you have a responsibility to know who that little alien is that God put in your house. You have a responsibility to know them. What makes them sad? What makes them mad? What makes them lose their temper? What makes them throw a fit? What are they compassionate toward? What do they laugh about? What do they cry about? You have to invest the time to know who they are. And this takes watching them, and it takes listening to them, and it takes being present with them. Come on. We have to raise them according to their bents and their personalities. Jake, he always learned from books. I mean, like from day one. He's 6 months old down there reading the Encyclopedia Britannica, all right? I mean, he's always learned from books. He's still that way to this day. He reads theology and apologetics for fun, everybody, okay? If you don't know what that is, thank God, okay? Anyway. So Jake learns from books. Janessa, she learns from books, but she learns mostly from experiences. So as parents, we had to make sure that we had a home library and a library card, and we also had to make sure we went and did family adventures. A recent survey, the top 3 answers that parents give when their children come to them. Here's the top 3 answers that parents give when their kids come to them and ask them something. Here they are. I'm too tired, we don't have the money, and just keep quiet. Isn't that terrible that those are the 3 answers? And one little boy heard this and he said, well, as soon as we're born, they teach us to walk and talk, but from that moment on, they tell us to sit down and shut up. Mm-hmm. The scripture here is not talking about raising them according to a set of rules. It's not even talking about raising them according to certain theology. It's not talking about that at all. It's about raising them, watch this, according to their personality. And that takes watching. And if you try to force them to be like you, or force them to be like the other, or force them to be like little Johnny down the road, they're going to be angry, they're going to be sad, they're going to be mad, they're going to be depressed, they're going to be anxious, they're going to be fearful, they're not going to have security because we are meant to groom them in the way they should go. Is that making sense so far? The second thing I get out of Proverbs 22, it says train them. And so I did a little deeper dive into this, and this is interesting. The word train or train them up, here's what it means. It means to create a thirst. Do I have that definition at all? Okay, yeah, okay. To create a thirst or to direct or lead. So once I figure out what's their bents, I start creating a thirst toward their bent. I start leading them according to who they are. Is that making sense? We got too many daddies trying to force Johnny to play sports, and Johnny doesn't like sports. Johnny is an artist. And he's frustrated because Daddy wants to relive his glory days through Johnny, but Johnny wants to play the guitar and color pictures. Come on, somebody, help me out here. Grandmas and grandpas, I need some good old-fashioned amens in here today, all right? Okay, so... And so one of the things I did to try to do this is we always tried to take them wherever we went. I did youth camp. I preached youth camps for like 12 years, 12 summers in a row. And they went with us all the time. And I try to take them with me when I preached in conferences. And they'd sit as young kids around table with pretty important people over their lifetime and over the years. And I remember one time I was preaching at a church, their dedication, they had just opened a beautiful new 3,000-seat auditorium, Luke Barnett in Dayton, Ohio. And I was preaching. When I got done preaching, I was down talking with people around the front of the stage. We used to call the altar. And it was a bowl-type auditorium. So it was like a main floor, then it bowled up, just like an auditorium. And Patty used to dress Janessa in all these little frilly dresses, especially when we would go away. And she was wearing this purple dress with a whole bunch of white frills in it. And I was up there talking with somebody and praying with somebody, and I seen a flash of purple and white rolling down the bowl of the auditorium. I just did as any pastor would do and said, praise God, as she rolled down. But you got to give them the experiences based on who they are. Don't take them to the ball game if they'd rather go to a concert. Come on now, right? And so now Janessa, she's probably told you this in sermons that she's preached here, but Janessa tried everything. And so it wasn't like a one and done. It was a long journey to help her figure out her bent and who she was. One year it was softball, then it was basketball, then it was cheerleading, and then it was jump rope club, and then it was underwater basket weaving, and then it was karate. And then one day somebody from the church asked her about theater. And that was her thing. In fact, she just had opening weekend this weekend of Into the Woods, and the tickets are sold out. She runs that show, and that was her bent. And so it wasn't long after that, I had an opportunity to go preach in New York, so we're in Times Square, and I thought, this is my moment, because she loves theater. We bought Broadway tickets. I forgot the show, or maybe I didn't, but I don't want to tell you what it was, all right? We bought tickets. We had a bunch of people going to go with us that were there with us on the trip. And I got to looking. It was going to cost me more to rent 2 taxi cabs or enough taxi cabs to get everybody to the theater. And so it was cheaper for me to rent a limousine. So I rented a limousine. Come on now. We got all dressed up. We put on our Sunday go-to-meeting clothes. She had her little clothes on, and we got in that limo. I mean, she was like 8 at the time. She thought her dad was a rock star. Don't you love the days when your kids think you're a rock star? I opened the door, and we got in the limo, woo, and we got to the theater. We got out, went into the show, and the limo driver said, hey, buddy, let me tell you, when the show's over, if you want another ride back to your hotel, I'll be here in the back alley. So when the show's over and everyone gets up and heads toward the door, you go toward that back exit door, walk out, and I'll be there with the door open. I thought, absolutely. The show was over. Everybody's running out. And I said, little girl, come on, follow your dad. And I opened the door, and there was the limo in the alley waiting for us. Come on, everybody, right? Here's what I'm saying. You got to raise your kids and expose them to who they are. Jake, I don't remember how old he was. He loved Legos, and he loved building them in his room by himself. And one day he came to me and said, Dad, I want this pirate ship Lego thing. And it was huge. It was bigger than him, everybody. And I'll never forget, it was $89.99. I thought, man, $89.99. And I told him, I said, Jake, that's a lot of money. He says, I know, but I want it, And I said, I'm like, okay. And so I said, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm getting ready to go preach in Florida. I'm going to be gone for like 4 or 5 days. When I get back, he was in a little thing called Bible Quiz where they memorize Bible questions and memorize verses. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you $1 for every Bible verse you memorize. I thought when I got back, maybe he'd get 20, I got back from that trip, and he quoted to me 89 Bible verses. You have to raise them according to their bents, is what I'm trying to tell you. Okay? And if I would have done that with Janessa, she might have quoted 89 Bible verses, but she would have done it upside down, all right? And I'll never forget, I gave them $91 bills because I wanted them to understand how much $90 was. We had put the pirate ship on layaway. Anybody remember that thing you could do? And so little Jake went with a wad of money that was bigger than his face. You know, I mean, it was this tall. And he went up there and the lady said, that'll be however much. And he looked at me and said, is that all of it? I said, yeah, get used to it, buddy. That's how it is. All right? You got to raise them according to their bents. Number 3, here's what that verse says to me. Number 3 is you got to raise them in their way. So you got to know your child, you got to train them up, but you got to train them in their particular way. Now I want to make a statement here that's built off my opening statement. Children are not born as a hunk of clay that we can mold into whatever we want them to be. Oh, I'm glad you said amen to that. And I want you to notice where the amens are coming. There's a few, I apologize, but there's a few gray hairs on the amens that are coming. Because if not, we have this idea, oh, we've been given this lump of clay. We can turn them into anything we want them to be. And so then we try to live vicariously and fulfill all the dreams we didn't get fulfilled through our children, and it frustrates them. Children are not a hunk of clay. Listen to me. They are born with a God-given plan and God-given uniqueness and God-given, come on, is that making sense? God-given potential inside of. In other words, God designed a personality for each one of them to accomplish His will for Him on this earth. Come on, will you hear that? Now, this often leads to frustration because they are nothing like us, or they're too much like us. That's your daughter, you know what I mean, right? And they're nothing like one another. And we can't necessarily raise them the way that we were raised or that we raised the previous child. What worked for one, don't think, oh, I've cracked the code. No, you haven't. You haven't cracked the code. Think about this. Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve had they had more kids, but they had Cain and Abel, right? And Abel was pliable. He had a pliable will. He was a lover of God. He was unselfish. Cain came along. He had a strong will. He loved himself. They were completely different. Who are you going to blame? The junior high teacher? No. There wasn't a junior high teacher. Who are you going to blame on them? The cousins? No, there wasn't any cousins. Who are you going to blame? The grandparents? No, you can't ever blame grandparents. Thus saith the Lord. Come on, grandpas and grandmas. Right? You cannot. Who are you going to blame? They were completely different. We are different. I could go through case study after case study. Jacob and Esau, completely different temperaments, mindsets, different. They had to be raised differently. Jake, in his life, he got one spanking his whole life. I'm not advocating that. That's just what we did. And it was one swat. Pow! Cracked him on the hiney. And that's a Greek word for you know what. And I cracked him on the hiney. Loved him, hugged him, told him I loved him after. He got one swat his entire life. And from that moment on, one look at him, he'd be, all right, Dad, I got you. He was a fast learner. We'd be sitting around tables with preachers from around the nation and just neat people that we got to meet through our ministry life. And if he'd start getting squirrely, I'd just look at him. You know, the stink eye? You know what? You guys got that. If you're a parent, you got to have that down. That's your first weapon, all right? And I'd give him the stink eye, and he'd be, okay, Dad. If you gave Janessa the stink eye, she would give you a stink eye back, all right? You know, it's like, and she'd turn around and go. Here's some takeaways real quick from Proverbs 22. Again, I'm not making a Bible study out of this. I'm just kind of using it as a backdrop. Here's some takeaways from Proverbs 22 that we can apply. Verse number 6. Number 1 is help your child discover who they are. Okay? Help your child discover who they are. I've done a lot of teaching on this, but we get our identities from our dads. Dads, you got to be present. Not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, you have to engage. And if you're single moms in the room, God will anoint you to be daddy also. Okay? And so because God redeems. But hear me. Tell them Tell them what they are. Tell them who they are. Tell them what they're good at. Identify their strengths for them. Wow, you're the fastest runner I ever saw. I mean, you got to start age appropriate, right? I told Kenny this the other day. I said, I have never seen somebody mold Play-Doh quite the way you mold Play-Doh. You're the best Play-Doh builder I have ever seen. But you begin that, and you begin to, you can't identify their strengths if you're not watching them. Okay? And so let me tell you a little tradition we have in our home. This is one of the things we stumbled on. We do this little birthday tradition. In fact, it's free. You can have it. And when it's our birthdays, we've been doing this since they were old enough to talk. We'll go on the particular person's birthday, we'll go around the room and we'll talk about something that we love about that person, or a character trait, or something they accomplished that year. And it is one of the most moving, we still do it to this day. We'll gather around the table. We just had Kenny's birthday. That's when I told her the Play-Doh story, all right? And we'll gather around. She's not quite old enough yet. But Carmen's birthday's coming up. Patty's birthday's coming up. Me and Janessa just had our birthday. And whew, I'm telling you what my family said about me sitting around that table. I'll tell you, it'll keep me floating for another year. It'll keep me sailing for another year. Because, I didn't even know you noticed that. I was wondering, you know? And you just go around the room and you begin to identify their strengths and talk about what you love about them, their character, their traits, who they are. Identity is the doorway to our destiny. And if we can help our kids know who they are, then they have a greater chance of fulfilling their destiny. Now, if you're sitting there as a parent and you're getting discouraged because, I missed it, God can still redeem it. And even with older children, you can instill this into their lives. Can I get an amen on that, right? But kids, for those of you that still have little kids at home, kids are looking for someone to identify them. And if you don't identify them, they'll look for a boy, they'll look for a girl, they'll look for a job, they'll look for something else to identify them. Even Jesus needed his Father to identify him. Matthew chapter number 3, the heaven opens. This is my Son, whom I love, and I am well pleased. Let me tell you a personal story. Most of you know my story. I didn't grow up with my dad. It wasn't really till I was 40 years old that I really got to have a relationship with my dad. And one night, we were there, and before we knew it, we had stayed up all night. He had a little shop next to his house, and in the shop, he had like a little bar, and we would hang out over there and talk motorcycles and just talk. And one night, we just got to talking, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, he said, "Son, I am so sorry for the childhood you had to grow up in and that I wasn't there." And I was talking to him about actually starting this church. And I was telling him that I was a little bit nervous and I didn't know how I was going to do it. He began to tell me how he started his business, and then one thing led to another. I said, Dad, I really hope I can do this. Now, my dad wasn't a Christian, and some people, you gotta accept people, right? You gotta open your circle of love. And so I started asking him advice. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, what is my dad going to ever tell me about building a church? But I felt God say, ask him. And the things he started telling me about building his business, and all of a sudden, he looked across the bar at me and he said, "Son, if anybody could do it, you could do it." He said, "I've never seen such a great leader." He started crying. Tears started coming down his face, saying, "You make me a better person whenever you're around. You make people better when you're around. If anybody can do it, you could do it. I love you, son, and I'm proud of you." When he said that to me, it was like 40 years of pain dissolved in one sentence, everybody. Come on. Are you hearing what I'm saying there? See, identity provides security, and kids are looking for security. So parents, you got to know who they are. You got to like who they are, and don't need anyone else to approve who they are. Okay, let me hurry up. I've got 10 minutes here. Number 2 is you got to develop their good bents. Okay, so once you find, that's what she likes adventure. I got to develop that. To this day, at least once she always goes on a trip by herself. She's been around the world. Most of the time, either Patty or I will go with her on some big adventure. They just got back from Europe, went to Italy and Spain, and because that's her adventure. But I wonder what would have happened if we wouldn't have developed their good bents. My son and I, we'll sit around, we'll talk about theology. We'll talk about Bible stuff that we could never preach because it would bore some people to tears. But I developed that bent in him when he was really young. Is that making sense? See, developing their good bents takes keeping an eye on them, keeping an eye on their interests, keeping an eye on not only their interests, but their dislikes. Come on now. If your kid doesn't like green peas, don't make them eat green peas. That's just me. That's not even Bible. I think before the fall of Adam and Eve, green peas tasted like chocolate chip ice cream. Can I get an amen? And the devil cursed them. Anyway, that's just me. Sorry, just a side note here, all right? But like I said a minute ago, know what they get mad about. Know what they're sad about. Know what they're excited about. Let me give you a little clue. That doesn't happen by you saying, what are you mad about? When they're mad. When I'm mad, I can't think straight anyway. What are you sad about? When they're sad. No, you got to carve out moments in their life that these conversations happen organically. We found the best thing was the rhythm of bedtime. We prepared at least, I know it sounds like a lot, 30 minutes for each kid at bedtime. We'd go tuck them in, and here was our question. Tell me about your day. And Jake would say something like, I was sad today because like this little girl dropped her book and some of the kids made fun of her. And we'd talk about that. And Janessa, she always hated to go to bed, so she would say, so I'd say, tell me about your day. And she would say, well, I woke up, like in real time. And then I went and got a Pop-Tart, and then I got dressed. I'm like, yeah, but what was the main thing that happened today, right? Okay. And so we found that the rhythm of bedtime is a great time because most little kids, they don't want to go to bed. Am I right? And so they'll talk, they'll chitter-chatter, they'll ask questions. If you create a time, there ought to be a rhythm of bedtime. Maybe a Bible story, maybe prayer time, maybe telling them, that's the time. Man, you know what I seen you do today? I'm so proud of you. You picked up your toys without me asking. It's those kind of things. Kids desperately need a routine, Mom and Dad. They need a routine, all right? And make bedtime special. Let me give you, this is a quick side note. I won't really preach these, and then I got one more point. Are you guys still with me? Yeah. Okay, 3 most important needs of a child. Let me just give them to you. Just throw them all on there. Attention, affirmation, and discipline. Let me just talk about them a little bit. Attention. Remember Matthew 3 when the heavens opened and God said, this is my son. Watch this verse real quick. It would be a great verse to preach. This is my son. There's identity. And then he says, who I love, that's validity. And then he says, who I'm well pleased, that's stability. You see that? God did all of that with one affirmation. Our kids need that. They need identity, they need validity, and they need stability. Okay? This is my son, I love, and I'm pleased. Okay? Make sure when you're disappointed in an action, they know you're not disappointed in them. Now a little quiet there. All right. Affirmation. Affirmation is just that. And by the way, don't make your affirmations just verbal. Parents, it's okay to hug. It's okay to kiss. It's okay, all right? You're the mom and dad. Tell them what you see in them. Tell them, man, I noticed you love reading. Tell me about what you read. I noticed you love sports. Have you thought about trying out for, okay? Tell them. And then this one, discipline, that one needs a whole sermon on itself. How many know that, right? But here's what I want to say. I'm trying to help you, all right? So parents, set boundaries and enforce the boundaries you set. Okay, let me give you one of mine. Stop counting to 10 to get them to obey. You can set grandma on fire in 10 seconds. How many know what I'm talking about, right? And if you're one of them parents that count to three, I'm not going to bust on you for that. We weren't counting to 3. No meant no, and yes meant yes. The first time, that was it. And if you need to count to 3, then count to 3. But get to 3 already. I mean, you come up with the craziest fractions I've ever heard. 1, 2, he's coloring on the wall, he's setting grandma's wig on fire, whatever's going on, and you're like, 2, 2.1, 2 3/8. What? Is that even a number? And you never get to 3. Set boundaries. And boundaries have consequences. If you don't teach them boundaries, they'll grow up, and we are living in a world of adults that don't have boundaries. Nobody slapped their hand when they grab the thing they should not be grabbing. Parents, hear me real careful. If you can't execute the consequences, they will manipulate you to the nth degree. They'll know, oh, daddy said no, but watch me work mama over. Okay, number three, this is my last one, is so help your child discover who they are, develop their good bents. Watch this. Here's the battle. Oppose their bad bents. Oh, my little Johnny doesn't have any bad bents. Yes, he does. We all have bad bents. We all have bad parts of us. We all live in a fallen world. So build up the right stuff, but battle the wrong stuff. Again, I've said it over and over. Discipline each kid different. Discipline with consistency. I told our young men as fathers, from about 8 months old, they'll start pushing on you. They'll start, it might be subtle, depending on what your kid, but about 8 months, according to psychology, they'll start challenging your authority. 8 months old. They can't even say authority, but they're pushing on it. And so from about 0 to 4, listen to me, parents, you have to win every battle from 0 to 4. Johnny can't win the battle. Do you want 17-year-old Johnny running your house? You got to win the battles from 0 to 4. Come on. And here's what I know from experience, and I also know this from psychologists and books. If you win the battle from 0 to 4, from 4 to 18, you won't have to win that battle because they will know the boundaries. Come on, everybody. So win the battles. They start at about 8 months. And then here's a book that'll back up some of what I'm saying. Some of you have read Boundaries by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. You ever heard the Boundaries book? Well, this is the kids' version. Every parent that still has, especially elementary kids living at home or teenagers, Boundaries with Kids, I encourage you to read it, all right? Listen a lot during this stage and what they are saying. Have conversation. Hey, when you're having conversations with kids, sit down at their level. You know how intimidating it is, hey, what were you doing, right? Get down and look them eye to eye. Okay, I'm going to tell you a pet peeve. I can't find a scripture verse for this one, but I'm going to tell you it anyway. It's free. We're not going to charge you extra for this point. When I say pay attention, parents, turn off your freaking cell phones and look Johnny in the face. Johnny wants attention, and we got a generation that's on their cell phones. Come on, everybody. If Johnny's with you, who else do you need to be talking to at the moment? Because you got to keep your eye on them. I knew that point wasn't going to go over good, but do I got anybody that's at least 90 that can say, yeah, preach that? Oh, listen to all them 90-year-olds. That family time, don't let that be that phone don't even need to be in there. That's the most sacred moment you're ever going to have, and it'll be gone. Keep your eye. Here's what I told the young men in Young Men's Discipleship. I'm a pastor. I like alliterations, and so I said, keep your eyes on them, especially pools, pals, and predators. Let me say it again. Pools, pals, and predators. It covers all the bases. Pools, that means you got to keep an eye on them, whatever they're doing. That's why no has to mean no. They can't be running toward the highway and you're going, 2.1. A semi is barreling down the highway and you're like, now I told you this is your 10th time, John. Johnny's going to be a pancake. That's why no has to mean no. Okay? All right. So pools, anything, there's accidents waiting to happen, right? Pals. No, you're not going to your pal's house until I do a background check, fingerprints, get blood. No, background. Come on, right? We don't even let people go work in our nursery until we've done all that. Pools, pals, and predators, they're out there. Okay? They are out there. And listen, you ought to think weird until they grow. You ought to be suspicious of everybody. Because God didn't give you the responsibility of the next door neighbor. He gave you the responsibility of that child. And someone has to watch out for them. Okay, I got to close. I'm going to close with a story. All right? I almost ask your permission. I'm going to do it anyway. All right? So, I don't remember tooth fairies when I was a kid. I don't remember that. I never got to read like a fairy tale book. I didn't even read fairy tale books until my kids came along. I didn't know about them. Didn't play family games until my kids came along. And so my kids being born, it was like me being born again. I got to go down some roads I didn't get to go down. And I don't remember if it was Jake's first tooth or not. Some of the details get, but Jake lost a tooth and he put the tooth under his pillow. And I was snuck in there with his mom, with Patty, and I put a $1 bill under and took the tooth out. She collected them. She still has all their teeth floating around here somewhere. Like one day, oh, look, we have our teeth. I don't know, but anyway. Little curls of hair. I'm like, whatever. Okay, take a picture. Anyway, sorry. And so I put a $1 bill under there. The next morning, he comes flying downstairs, and he's waving a $5 bill. It's like, woohoo! Man, I love the tooth fairy. Look at this $5 bill. I looked at Patty and said, She said, well, it's his first tooth. We have to celebrate, man. I'm like, $5? I had to mow a whole yard, front and back, for $5. He just lost a tooth already. Well, Janessa was sitting there, and she seen him waving his I got $5, I got $5, right? And Janessa's there, and she's watching this. And I come home from the office. I don't know if it was the next day or a few days later, but I came home from the office one day. She was upstairs in her room. She had a string tied to her eye tooth right here and to the doorknob, and she's slamming the door. And I'm like, girl, what are you doing? And she looked at me in her little innocent eyes and said, I need the money. And then I blinked.
Come on.
And they were gone. And there's days I desperately wish I could go back upstairs and see her with the string tied to her tooth. How many parents know what I'm talking about? Quit wishing these days away. Quit calling them terrible twos. Quit identifying them as bad things. God took that child and put them in your home for you to steward them. And you're going to blink. And the sticky tables will be gone. And you're going to blink, and the dog getting picked on will be gone. And you're going to blink. How many have raised children you know it's true? They'll be gone. Cherish these moments, right, everybody? God put that child in your life. Will you receive that today, everybody? I'm going to close right there. All right.